Going live now. Just a few moments. And your meeting is live.
Kia ora. Thank you, Tracy, for taking us live for this meeting of the Mangawhai Community Park Governance Committee for the 7th of September, which is being held online, as you can see, due to COVID status. So we have mostly everyone here, but so just for everyone's clarity, the process that we're going to run the meeting is that I'm sorry, I'm still getting the echo. It's quite difficult. Tracy, are you muted yet? Okay. So somebody there is going to need to mute. Could everyone who doesn't need to be speaking right now please mute? Great, that sounds much better now, whoever's done that. Okay, so the process is that we'll be introducing the item. We will go with a mover and a seconder to get it onto the table. Then we'll have the presenter give their version of what's in front of us, and then we will have a chance to ask questions. In order to ask questions, I ask that the members use the raise hand option. For those who are new to this environment, if you go down to the bottom of your WebEx screen, there's a little round button which if you hover over it is called reactions. And if you press on that, click on that, there is a raise hand option at the top of that. So you click on that to raise your hand. I'll demonstrate what happens. You get a little hand raised, so I know that you want to speak. And once you're done speaking, you lower your hand. So if people could use that, it just helps with a smooth running of the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to open the meeting with the karakia right now. Kia hora te marano, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, he huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Okay, so we'll move into the meeting now with apologies. I have not received any apologies, but I see that I don't think Georgina is here. So I think on that basis, we'll note her absence as opposed to recording an apology. I'm not sure. I'll move that we note her absence. Can I have a seconder that we note the absence? Erin, Councillor Wilson-Collins, thank you. All in favour and against? Okay, carried. Okay, so now we'll move on to the agenda. You have it in front of you, or possibly to one side in my case. Are there any comments that anyone would like to make on the agenda in terms of needing to move items around or do them in a different order or remove anything off the agenda? No? Okay. Can I have a mover that the agenda is confirmed? That's Mayor Smith, and a seconder? Councillor Wilson-Collins. All in favour? Against? Carried. So that's the agenda confirmed. Are there any conflicts of interest that anyone wants to declare with any matter that's on the agenda? You can do so now or when the item arises, should it become apparent while we're discussing it that you have a conflict at that point. No? Okay. Then we will move on to the minutes. We've got two sets of minutes to approve today. One is the open minutes from the ordinary meeting of the committee on the 14th of June as attached. Are there any comments that anyone wants to make on those? No? Okay, we will move that those minutes be approved. Mayor Smith is moving that.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, the mayor has a comment.
Sorry, I have it's a question. It's a bit of a process related question. The master plan review process. It's talked about here. Should it be a standing item on all of the committee meetings of this committee going forward for the next period? Sorry, it's a process related question there. So it's less about the minutes and more just prompted out of those minutes.
Okay, we'll deal with that now, and then we'll come back to approving that. So can we have a comment maybe from Jim Sefton on that, or Jenny Rooney? I'm not sure which of you. Jim Sefton, I notice your hand's raised. Are you on mute, Jim?
Kia ora koutou.
Yeah.
Schoolboy error. Your Worship, so the review of the reserve management plan won't actually commence until next year. So at the moment we're just developing an implementation plan, which is very short-term focused.
Okay, all good. So are you happy still to move the minutes, Mayor? Yes, and Morris, you're happy to second. Cool. All in favour of the minutes being approved? Against? Carried. Jim, I'm Jim Wintle. I'm just going to comment that I can't actually see you because your video is not on. So you're going to need to speak if you want to vote against something or be heard. So I'm just letting you know that I can't actually see you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next set of minutes, which is from the extraordinary meeting of the Mangawhai Community Park Governance Committee on the 9th of August, which considered the location of the new public toilets going into the park. So can I have firstly, are there any comments as to the accuracy of the minutes? No? Can I have a mover, please, for this set of minutes? Councillor Larson and Councillor Wilson-Collins seconding. We'll put that to the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, we will move on now to the next item, which is the operations update. And I note that the reporting officer here is Donna Powell, who's the new infrastructure operations team leader. And we have a new format of the report, which is helpful. So I'm not sure whether it's Donna or Jim Sefton, somebody who's presenting this one.
Kia ora koutou. I just asked Tracy to dial Donna into this if she could. I'll just take the report as read, and I will take any questions. There were a few questions that came in before, and I've got some answers from the team. So in terms of, I guess we have provided a slightly different report this month. This is an operations report that's consistent with the other premier parks in Kaipara. We've tried to make it more transparent in terms of the risk side of things, so that we can provide you with the appropriate level of transparency. The few questions that came through, we haven't been able to do. There's some questions around tree felling. Apparently, there's an item on Facebook. We haven't been able to identify anything there. We have had we only have one infrastructure officer who's dedicated to parks. Unfortunately, he's on leave at the moment, so we haven't been able to find anything to collaborate what's happened there. It's certainly not a KDC contractor. We can confirm that. And in terms of water quality, we are working through a process there. Clearly, that's an area that's of significant concern to us, and we need to make sure that we do meet the District Health Board assessment requirements in terms of a water source. It is a water source that was originally intended purely for the toilets, and has been extended for other uses. Whilst we have had checks done, we do need to do some more work there, and we'll come back to the committee with a detailed plan of action there, not just in terms of any upgrades that are required, but also in terms of a ongoing maintenance regime, so that we can be confident that we've got a safe drinking supply there. And I think there was a third question regarding the marginal breach for consent, and I think Jenny has an answer for that one, if I can.
Kia ora, everyone. Yes, I can answer that one. The deemed marginal breach. So what happened when the project team started working with the Mangawhai Community Park, we were able to ascertain that a lot of the buildings within the historic village had minimal consents. So what we were able to do is being able to work with them and bring them up to date. So this was the last of the consents that needed to be passed, and that's for the cinema. It just means that the cinema is able to operate. It didn't have a consent at the time, but it does now.
Right, thank you. Any further sort of comments from the presenters?
No, happy to take any questions.
Great. Okay, so I'll open. Oh, sorry, we need to move and second this to get on the table. Sorry, I skipped that particular step. So can I have a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Councillor Larson, Councillor Wilson-Collins, thank you. Right, so we'll open it up to questions now. Are there any questions on the operations report as presented to us? Both on the papers and also in what was talked about. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just about that water. Who owns the scheme? Who set it up, and who runs it?
As a council park, so through the chair, as a council park, it's essentially it is a council scheme. It's not part of our main scheme, and as I said, whilst it was intended, the original intention was for it to be a providing water for the toilets. Its use has been extended, and we need to make sure that the protections that are in place. I'll just check with my property manager, John, just to see if there's any other pertinent points to raise there.
Thanks, Jim. From recollection, it was a developer of the subdivision across the road that originally developed the water and made it available to MAS. And then, as Jim said, it's been extended since that time.
Any further questions? We'll go with the Mayor and then Councillor De Olivares Woodcock.
Sorry, so just for clarity, so it's now a council system, but it was set up by a developer across the road. Is that right? You know, I mean, yeah. I'm confused here.
Through the chair, it's a situation that the team are working through to provide some real clarity around what that ownership model looks like. But by default, it's on council land. It sounds like it was, whilst it may have been provided for MAS, it's not part of any agreement that council has as part of its license to occupy. And so that's something that needs to be resolved urgently.
Thank you. That's clear. Thank you.
Councillor De Olivares Woodcock.
My question is about the Wetlands Redevelopment, and I was wondering about the 1,200 spent of the budget of wondering what managed to expenditure.
Councillor De Olivares, yes, if you turn your video off, that might help. We're just struggling to hear you a little. Could you ask your question again, please, perhaps without your video,
Sorry,
just so that we can hear your voice, perhaps?
Sorry. Sure. the wetlands redevelopment expenditure. I was wondering, it's mentioned in the operations update that they're working with NRC to progress the rehabilitations of the wetlands, and I was wondering what the expenditure to date has obtained and what is going to happen going forward, because the planting season is nearly over. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very clear.
Through the chair, I'll see if Jenny is able to add to that. Otherwise, I'll provide what information I have.
I don't have any further information, Jim.
Okay. So through the chair, the work to date has been really to establish the extent of the wetlands. There's one wetland which is recognised by NRC as a wetland. However, there are other areas of the park that essentially function as a wetland. So the work that's been done to date has been involved some drone footage and some thermal imaging, which will help to provide that evidence base. So this year isn't about planting as such, it's more about understanding where the edges of those wetlands are, making sure that they're documented and getting them into our plan so that they are protected in terms of any other work that's happening in the park.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Any other questions? Yeah, I had a question, if I may, just on the pest plant removal program. I'm just wanting to get a bit of clarity on that, because we do sort of we're in quite a dynamic position with the clearance having been done, with replanting being delayed, and now the rest of the park is it sort of feels like it's being sort of falling into a little bit of disrepair in terms of the asparagus weed invasion and various other pest plants. So I'm just wondering if I could get a comment from officers about where things are at with that.
Certainly. Through the chair, we have identified the need for a pest management plan. We currently, within the operations budget, don't have sufficient budget to really be able to perhaps tackle it to the extent that we need to. What we could take as officers, if we can take some direction from your comments, and we will come back with a suggestion about how we might be able to address that, because we do acknowledge that there is there are pest plant issues, and we need to be able to get on top of it and then keep on top of it. So through the chair, we'll come back to the next committee meeting with a proposal with regards to that.
That would be helpful, thanks. I think we do need to try and find a way to make some progress on that particular topic. Okay, are there any further questions on the operations report? No? Okay, I'll put it to the vote then that we note the operations report. Moved by Councillor De La Barris Woodcock, thank you, and seconded by Maurice Langdon, thank you. So I'll put that to the vote now. All in favour? And against? Okay, we'll take that as carried. Thank you. So we'll move on now to the project team update, which I presume is going to be presented by Jenny Rooney. I'll move that gets on the table. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Wilson-Collins. Right, Jenny, if you could present your report to us, that would be good.
Kia ora. Yeah, I take it that my report has been read by everyone, and I'm just presenting the update of our weekly meetings that we have with the project team and working with ensuring that the master plan is implemented. So if you have any, I know there was a couple of questions that came through over the weekend, and one of them was around the proposed, I mentioned the proposed dairying location, and that would move to the shared path. So through the chair, I think was you, Councillor Curnow, that asked the question. Yes. So just in terms of, we have nothing from the Deering at the moment, from the Deering Trust for consents or anything formal, but we're just aware that originally they have muted to us that this is the area that they would like to have the Deering. So when we saw that the shared path was originally proposed to come down there, we thought it was best at that time to discuss how we could work around that and ensure that that area was clear, which we have done, and been able to relocate the shared path with more aesthetically pleasing anyway in front of the historic village, and it'll join up with the main entrance.
Okay, thank you. Mayor, I noticed you had a question, perhaps?
Sorry, I was just seeking clarification on these points to which Jenny's raising verbally here. Yeah, saying, oh, when the path comes down there and runs over there and so on.
Oh, sorry.
I'm just like trying to go, where is there? Yeah, that's all. Yeah,
Got it, Jenny. So yeah, maybe you can just be really specific about where the path was going to go and where it is now.
Okay. So the path was originally proposed to come down by the historic village, where the toilet location is going. So on that side of the historic village, coming down and meeting the car park. When we looked at that, it wasn't going to work. So then we've proposed to move it to where the cinema building is.
Yep.
And that then it will come down adjacent with the Molesworth Drive.
Great.
On that side.
Everyone clear on that now? Great.
Cool.
Great. So are there any further questions on this project team report? No, I have a couple. The planting day that Maz was organising, are we running out of time for planting? And if so, what's the plan for that area that was going to be planted in terms of maintaining a sort of a weed-free status?
Through the chair, at the moment we've cleared the area for the planting day. So we've had orangutan come in and do the clearing. I haven't had any more feedback. Obviously, we're still in level 3. We'll see what happens this afternoon. I know that Colin Gallagher from MAS is ready to go and has a group of volunteers ready, should we be able to move into a level where we can start planting.
Okay. All right, fingers crossed. And I think that was all I had. Yes, sorry, could you just give us a little bit of clarification on the museum's $100,000 loan, just for those who perhaps are new or aren't aware of what the situation is, sort of what that actually means?
I'll pass that one over to John because that's his area. I think you're on mute, John.
Thank you, Jenny. Yes, I wasn't particularly familiar with it, to be honest, but I did seek some clarification from our finance team, and apparently the loan was given around 2015 to 16. It's interest bearing and has a due date next year, 2022.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful to know that. Yeah, I wasn't aware that we had a loan with them. Okay, so are there any further questions on this project team report? No. Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. That we, I think I'll just go back and read the resolution for clarity. That we note the project team report. All those in favour? And against? Okay, that's carried. So now we will move on to the next item, which is the Mangawhai Museum lease report, and I think John Burt's going to be presenting this. So can I have a mover and a seconder to get the resolution, which are that we recommend to council for, so I'll read the resolution so the mover and the seconder know what they're moving and seconding. Recommends to council that it approve the Mangawhai Museum's proposal for a new lease license to occupy for a period of 35 years, and recommends to council that it accepts a surrender of the Mangawhai Museum's existing lease once the terms of the new LTO have been agreed. So can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Wilson-Collins moving and Councillor Larson seconding. Okay, so John, I believe you're presenting this. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. If I could take the report as read, and just give a bit of a background. Back in, I think it was 2017, council at that stage, not as this committee didn't exist at the time, passed a resolution to allow the museum to surrender most of its land, and it would then just retain the area underneath the museum and a bit of a curtilage around it. It's fair to say it's been a long process we've been through over the last 4 years. Many discussions with the museum, myself and Jenny and others have had. But we've arrived at a point where the museum is now happy with what's being proposed in terms of the area that they're going to surrender, which is less than what was originally discussed. And the location that has been agreed, where that once that surrender has been effected, the arts group will be able to establish their facility, subject to getting a development agreement from council. But having arrived at that point, the museum are have now turned their mind to tenure, and what they've now said is that their current lease only runs for until next year, and then there is a right of renewal. But having built such a magnificent facility on the land, they would really like to secure a longer tenure, and the longest period that can be provided without a resource consent is 35 years. Council's policy, as you will probably be aware, is to give community groups use of council land by way of licenses now, license to occupy. So what they're asking for is that they be given a new license to occupy for the maximum amount of time, 35 years. And that would require a surrender of the current lease to effect that. While 35 years is a very, very long time, the museum have invested in, or the Historical Society have invested and created a great facility there. Council doesn't normally get involved in direct operations of museums like some councils around the country do, and unlikely, in my view, that would change in the medium term. So I think it's a fair request from the museum, and officers are minded to recommend that that this committee recommends to council that they approve that. But as I say, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions from the committee? Mayor Smith.
Kia ora. Thank you, Madam Chair. Simple question. Reading back in the history here, it seems that the museum wanted to surrender some of its land and go back to just having the footprint of the building under its responsibility, and then more recently has changed that view again. So it's kind of run all over the park, if you like, rather than being a really straightforward process. That's my understanding here. Is that correct?
That's correct. Through the chair, it's fair to say the museum has had different views over a period of time, and I guess it in part because there's been different people involved from the museum side, and initially they were of the view that they didn't want to go to a license to occupy. They were quite happy to retain the lease, but in recent times with the benefit of someone that's got quite on the museum board that's got quite a bit of legal experience around these matters, they have now come around to the view that a license is quite appropriate and comfortable with that. But they would, as you mentioned, like to retain a greater area of land than they previously had.
Thank you. Thank you. That's clear. It's I have a further question as well. The period here of 35 years is a long one, and as you've indicated, is pretty much the maximum for an LTO license to occupy. While we're absolutely wanting consistency as a principle, I'm sure, was there any consideration made to kind of, because it's an LTO and a rolling, changing world, if you like, that there's kind of 20 years plus 10 or 20 years plus 15 or 15 years plus 15 plus, rights of renewal, you know what I mean, rather than a giant block. Now I'm appreciating that the council has, like, if you like, a lease with the Kauri Museum regarding its space in Matakohi, which is a different story. But I'm just trying to seek clarity around the processes that you've gone through here, and that we are taking a consistent approach. Kia ora.
Thank you. Through the chair again, it is relatively consistent, as you say. The Kauri Museum has a long tenure as well. I know when the Dargaville Museum got a new LTO some years ago, that was for a 30-year period. Generally, as you say, you will write up the LTO with different periods, but provided that the museum continues to meet its obligations, they become a bit academic, really. You continue to grant them over the time, but you do have break periods that, say, it might be for 15 years or 20 years, and then a further term of 15, for example. That would be included in the terms of the LTO.
So just for clarity, John, what you're saying is that while the LTO is for a maximum of 35 years, that the LTO in this case may be broken into parts, or are you saying that in this case it will be for a solid 35 years?
No, I think in terms of the way we would document the LTO would be for several periods, two or three periods. So, yeah.
Right. Okay, so that's clear. Thank you. Any further questions on this from other members of the committee? Morris Langdon. I think you're on mute, Morris.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've just a few concerns around the amount of land that is being given to the museum for 35 years. If you look at the lease area, it seems quite a lot of land for them to hold in reserve while they do an extension and car parking, etc., etc. And they've literally stopped any access into Thelma Road from the back of the common area. It's just a bit of a concern about giving up so much land. That seems a little bit more than they'd need for 35 years. I mean, presumably if this gets agreed, council's got no comeback to go on and ask for land. I mean, did they just come up with this piece of land and bang, that's it? Was there any discussion around a lesser piece of land that didn't strip so far to the north or north here?
Through the chair, as per the answers I gave to the mayor, there has been discussion around a whole lot of different, I guess, connotations in terms of what areas they would surrender. I guess the starting point is they have a lease now. That lease on all of that land potentially runs for another 11 years because while the initial term runs out next year in 2022, they do have a 10-year right of renewal, which so in certain respects they have that land and they have the ability to continue to use it up until at least 2032.
Yeah, but it's still less than 35 years, isn't it?
That's true, yeah.
Right.
Perhaps if I could jump in with a question, if there are breakpoints in the license to occupy, is there an opportunity at those breakpoints to reconsider the area?
That's but potentially yes, but potentially there could be those matters included in the LTO. I haven't had that discussion with the museum. In terms of the area, I mean the area along the frontage with Molesworth Drive is predominantly used by the museum for parking, and it's part of their resource consent. And then down off the area of Thelma, there's the space that's used for the camper van dump point and so forth, which is and also access to the back of the museum. So I think what we're really talking about in terms of any land that might be, I guess, able to be negotiated at a later date would be the strip along the back of the museum and furthest away from Molesworth Drive. If I'm reading what or interpreting what Morris is saying correctly.
Yes, that's correct.
Certainly we can have those discussions. So I can't really answer what the museum's view would be until I had that.
Morris, your thoughts?
Slightly uneasy, but guided by council officer's advice. In 35 years, I guess I can see quite a lot of demand for space in this park by lots of groups yet to emerge, and it does seem that we've got the opportunity to surrender less land here than is being asked for. And, 35 years is quite a long time. I'll leave it there. I don't really have any other thoughts than that.
Okay, now I'm conscious, committee, that I have been denying people the right to have their comments at the end of each of the items. The other items were noting items, but this is a decision item, so I think it's important that everyone has an opportunity to make a comment. So I'm check. Are we finished with questions at this point? Yeah. So, Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, you have a question.
Yeah. In terms of the wording of the lease, are there restrictions at all in terms of access to the site, to the lease area, in terms of accessibility? So I was wondering if there was a ability for people that weren't visiting the museum per se to have use of the site just to casually wander through, or is it a kind of do they have the right as lessees to erect fences and barricades in order to protect the museum building itself? And is that going to restrict access to what otherwise would have been part of a park? Because they kind of work against each other as the recreation of the area, and then an occupier sort of obstructing free access. So that's just a concern I have. Is there any comment on that from John?
Yes, through the chair, the current lease, if you're talking about that, is quite a common sort of usual lease where the leasee has quite extensive rights. The most appropriate one is what you're talking about is quiet enjoyment, and so that allows them to place restrictions on people's movements through it. Normally with an LTO, they're a little bit, if we agreed to the surrender and went to an LTO, they're a bit more aligned with the Reserve Act type of approach, where an occupier or a licensee has the ability to use it, but it has to be in common with others, or has some limitations to that right of quiet enjoyment. And so there is I guess some benefits to council in going to an LTO, which is why we have been pursuing this now for some years.
So what you're saying, John, is that the LTO actually gives more protection for the common use of those other areas.
Provides for more flexibility around that would probably be a fair comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any further questions? No? Okay, so we'll move on into statements. Morris, do you feel that your previous comment is your statement, or do you want to go again? Are you still on mute? No,
no, I'm just not sure how to respond, Madam Chair.
okay.
I think I'll just
Leave it as.
leave it. Yeah.
Okay. Any other statements that people want to make? Mayor Smith?
Kia ora. One of the most important things as we go forward is keeping, if you like, a sense of continuity, but also having options open in a very dynamic piece of real estate called the Mangawhai Community Park, i.e. if you just look at the item here regarding LTO lease and how the volunteers of the footprint area have changed over recent years. The new art, the Mangawhai Artists Facility is coming through within this footprint. It is changing it. The daring is sitting there for now in a temporary location. That's changing the temperature, if you like, on this footprint of dirt. And when I say temperature, that's in the kind of social well-being, cultural precinct space. The important thing for the council is to both be reflexive and dynamic here, as well as providing a surety and safety and continuity. And to get that balance right is the real trick. I'm speaking here in support of the work that's going on, but I'm just raising those flags, if you like, regarding issues of future public access, the understandings of it all being a public space, even though there are buildings there that are not freely available for the public because of our interesting council structure. And of course, issues of the road access and using Thelma Road in addition to Molesworth Drive, and just having those potentials, all of them wrapped into the opportunities for the future, and not precluding anything. and not limiting the potential of this great space inadvertently. That's what I would want to see, is that the council has an approach that is open rather than limiting in what so that we can be responsive to the volunteers who make all of the entertainments that happen in this cultural precinct. So yeah, it's a challenging space, but part of the work of the council is to be future focused, and this certainly is that. So yeah, I'm supportive of in this space, but just mindful that we need to be reflexive here. Yeah, kia ora.
Cool. Councillor Larson, you have a comment you'd like to make?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I support the proposal from staff. It's a very significant asset that's already been built there. I can't see it moving anytime soon, and the use of that area in adjacent to it is expanding in sort of a related way with the other facilities. So this is a recommendation for this committee to give to the full council, which gives another level of control if there are further considerations around it. But I'm happy to see this excellent volunteer facility be given some surety into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I concur with the concerns that have been raised. It's been a really interesting discussion. I actually don't think 35 years is that long when we're thinking about something like a museum that already houses such a huge history. The Mangawhai Museum in particular, it's such a beautiful little museum and a great asset. And I really think, like Councillor Larson has said, it won't be moving anytime soon. So I fully support this motion going through to the wider council for a decision. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further statements? Councillor Delabarus-Woodcock.
I support this shift to a license to occupy, and would like John's point that the legal arrangement offers more flexibility in terms of the shared space aspect of the use of the park. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Wintle, I'm conscious we haven't heard from you. Do you have any comment you want to make here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here, and my video won't work. Yes, I've got two minds on this subject at present, because it was always in my belief that we were going to take over the car park, and if that was to happen, then we have got access through to Thelma Road, which I believe, as Morris brought up, it's fairly important. Now, if the museum were to take over that part of the car parking, plus up the back to where their boundary line is, which is in fact in the wetland, they're taking that whole chunk out of everyone's ability to be able to use it. So that's I'm of two minds of what is actually needed in there, because the ultimate 2 hectares down there is going to become something like a mammoth museum. You know, we have the dairying there, we have the historic village, we have the art building, and we have the museum. And I think that eventually one day a lot of that will come together. And I wouldn't like to see anything restricted by the museum taking too much land now and we can't get it back in the next 35 years to be able to just titivate it a little bit. But that's a decision for councillors. But I'm okay with it moving forward to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I think that's everyone has had a say. So I'll just well, apart from me, I haven't had a say. So I'm conscious that when I listen to the discussion, there is a bit of concern, particularly around that area out the back, which has been in some plans or thoughts earmarked as car parking area. And if that becomes part of the museum's license to occupy, who is then responsible for that car parking? And if it's not going to be there, where is it going to be? So while I support this going through to council, I would hope that when it comes to council, there is a little bit more clarity around that area and what the intended use of that area is. Just so that we've got that clarity around in the future as that area becomes busier and we need a bit more car parking, where will that be and who will be responsible for it? However, having said that, this has been an extraordinarily long and complicated journey to get to this point, and the patience of everyone involved has been tested and found strong in their ability to stick with it. So I do want to thank everyone who's been involved for getting it to this stage. I think there's just this one last little thing that I'm hearing as a slight concern from the members about the use of that area and the responsibility of that area. So when it comes to council, if it could have something a little bit more detailed around that, that might be good. Yeah, but overall, I'm in favour. Now, you'll have to forgive me, Tracy. I have forgotten who the mover and the seconder was. So obviously we need rights of reply.
Mover was Councillor Wilson-Collins, seconded by Councillor Larson.
Okay, so we'll take it to the rights of reply. Councillor Wilson-Collins, anything further to say?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing further to add, thank you.
Cool. And Councillor Larson as the seconder?
No, thank you.
Great. Okay. So I think on that basis, we'll now put it to the vote. The resolution was on page, bear with me, on page 20 of the agenda, and I'll read it again just for those who might have forgotten. It recommends to council that it approve the Mangawhai Museum's proposal for a new licence to occupy for a period of 35 years, and recommends to council that it accepts the surrender of the Mangawhai Museum's existing lease once the terms of the new LTO have been agreed. So I'll put that to the vote now. All in favour? And against? Okay, so that is passed. Thank you very much. So that being the last item on the agenda, I'll close the meeting with the karakia. Kia tau ngā manakitanga a te mea ngaro. Ki runga ki tēnā o tātou. Kia mahia te hua makihikihi. Kia toi te kupu. Toi te mana. Toi te araha. Toi te reo Māori. Tihe Māori ora. Thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and yeah, see you soon.